educators and, of course, a pioneer with respect to Creole activities. And Madam President, as we bring closure to Creole Heritage Month, I take this opportunity to extend commendations and congratulations to all communities, agencies, organizations, and our cultural enthusiasts on the contributions they made towards ensuring the successful staging of our month-long celebrations. We particularly thank the thousands of patrons who turned out to support and participate in the various activities across our beautiful island, and in particular, the just concluded Journée Creole activities. Let us continue to découvrir and to discover our country. Let us continue, to celebrate who we are as a people. Our culture continues to evolve, Madam President, and our government remains committed to the development of our culture and heritage. And so we give you, Madam President, the assurance that we will continue to work with all stakeholders to ensure that the existing systems are strengthened in order to serve our people better. To date, my department has begun work on the review of the existing cultural policy to ensure adequate growth within the sector. The policy was developed as far back as 2005. We are also in the process of developing a cultural satellite account, which will allow us to better analyze the economic contribution and the impact of culture and the creative industries, thus enabling better policy development and decision moving forward. Madam President, as you mentioned earlier, this year, my government undertook its first ever St. Lucia cultural mission to Taiwan. And 16 of our local artists traveled to Taiwan to participate in the National Day celebrations. And of course, that also included the Taichung Festival, Jazz Festival. Our artists, of course, Buhengson and his friends, and the Tribe of 12, led by our colleague Senator Adrian Auger, formed part of our distinguished delegation to Taiwan. As you can tell, Madam President, we are committed to the growth of our cultural and creative industries, and we continue to provide opportunities for our artists to develop and showcase their talent, not only locally, but regionally and internationally as well. In closing, Madam President, I want to express heartfelt thanks to Ambassador Edwin, who worked tirelessly to ensure that all went smoothly, and based on the reports that I got, we were quite happy with the feedback from him with respect to the solutions in Taiwan, and of course some of the outstanding upcoming talents we have in Taiwan as well, like Carol Victor, who performed along with Buhengson and friends. Finally, I wish to take this opportunity to thank the Cultural Development Foundation Board that served our country well over the last 3 years, from October 2016 to September 2019. They were led under the leadership of Mr. Daniel Belizer, and of course the term of office has now come to an end. But we say thanks to that team for the tremendous work and effort that they put in over the last 3 years to ensure that we have achieved a measure of stability and are now looking to move to the next level with our cultural development. Thank you so much.
Honorable Leader of Government Business and Minister for Health and Wellness.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I too wish to add my voice to pay tribute to Mother Mariana Pinto, whom we laid to rest just last evening. I must say that we have lost one of our greatest philanthropists of all time, a true Samaritan, and a strong woman who gave her all and expected nothing in return. Mother Pinto contributed a lot to our St. Lucian society, especially to the social services and to needy children in St. Lucia. Her works, I believe, I cannot say how much we appreciate the works that Mother Pinto did in St. Lucia, although many people may not have even heard of her, because the work she does, she used to do. I even have trouble referring to her in the past, Madam President, because I know what a great loss she is to me, especially when it comes to the poor, the vulnerable in our society. The work that she did was unsurpassed. It was really, truly a works that somebody used to do from her heart and really expected nothing in return, which is something that you hardly find in our society today. So I personally will greatly miss Mother Pinto, especially coming from the same constituency that I was in. I know many times I called upon them, and the sisters of the Abbess were always there to assist. So personally, this is quite a loss for me. I also wish to say that we lost our brother Gaspar Charlemagne. Mr. Charlemagne was a very quiet and kind soul, a very unassuming individual, and a very humble and calm spirit. And I am truly going to miss him. It seems of late, Madam President, that we are losing quite a few of our very stable personalities in our society. And when this happens, it is of great, loss to all of us. So my condolences and that of my government goes out to the families. May they too find peace. Madam President, I wish to expand a little bit on what my fellow Senator, Ms. Belrose said. Mrs. Belrose said about the exhibition in Taiwan. I believe that we need to commend all the people who participate in that great show in Taiwan. I do not think that the people of Taiwan has ever been exposed to that sort of activity, especially coming from a small island state. I believe that we make a really remarkable impression on the people of Taiwan. And even after the show had left and our people, had left Taiwan, I visited Taiwan recently, and all I could hear about was that show that St. Lucia put on in Taiwan. Everybody now in Taiwan seemed to know St. Lucia, about St. Lucia. So it was really a great performance, an exceptional performance, especially since they had to travel so far to put on that performance, and they put it on so well, Madam President. I must say that my hat goes out to the participants, to the performers, to the people who made it happen, and of course to our Ambassador, Edwin Laura. Thank you, Madam President.
Papers to be laid. Honorable Minister for Health and Wellness and Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg to lay the following papers standing in my name. Statutory Instrument Number 126 of 2019, Excise Tax Amendment of Schedule 1, Number 12 Order. Statutory Instrument Number 127 of 2019, Price Control Amendment Number 14 Order. Statutory Instrument Number 128 of 2019, Labor Work Permit Fees Exemption, Events Company of St. Lucia, Inc. Order. Statutory Instrument Number 129 of 2019, Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court, Sentencing Guidelines Rules. Statutory Instrument Number 130 of 2019, 2015 Supplement to the Revised Edition of the Laws Commencement Order. Statutory Instrument Number 131 of 2019, Income Tax Exemption, Trust Media Corporation Limited Order. Statutory Instrument Number 132 of 2019, Income Tax Exemption, Public Sector Offices Order. Statutory Instrument Number 133 of 2019, Free Zone Regulations. Statutory Instrument Number 134 of 2019, Price Control Amendment Number 15 Order. Statutory Instrument Number 135 of 2019, Excise Tax Amendment of Schedule 1, Number 13 Order. Statutory Instrument Number 136 of 2019, Motor Vehicles and Road Traffic, Designation of Inspectors Amendment Order. Statutory Instrument Number 137 of 2019, St. Lucia National Housing Corporation, the Union Industrial Estate at Postlethwaite, Grozile, vest in order. Statutory instrument number 139 of 2019, legal profession eligibility, Juvenile Augustine John, order. Statutory instrument number 140 of 2019, International Business Companies Amendment number 2 regulations. Statutory instrument number 141 of 2019, income tax exemption, Uwanora International Airport Redevelopment Project, order. Statutory instrument number 143 of 2019, Banking Republic Bank EC Limited and the Bank of Nova Scotia Banking Business vest in order. Statutory instrument number 144 of 2019, Price Control Amendment number 14, order. Statutory instrument number 145 of 2019, Excise Tax Amendment of Schedule 1, number 14, order. Citizenship by Investment CIP, 2018-2019 Annual Report, Office of the Director of Audit. Also received is the Performance of Audit Report on the Maintenance of Government Buildings, August 2017. Office of the Director of Audit, Compliance Audit Report, Disaster Vulnerability Reduction Project, February 2018. Office of the Director of Audit, Performance Audit Report on St. Lucia's preparedness to implement the Sustainable Development Goals, July 2018.
Leader of Government Business, can you list again the first statutory instrument on your list? Can you tell me again?
Statutory instrument number 125 of 2019, Price Control Amendment number 13, order.
Thank you. Honorable Minister in the Ministry of Tourism, Information, Broadcasting, Culture and Creative Industries, responsible for culture and creative industries.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I'd like to lay the following papers standing in my name. Statutory instrument number 138 of 2019, Tourism Incentives, Nikos Touring Service Limited, order. Statutory instrument number 142 of 2019, Tourism Stimulus and Investment, Coconut Bay Management Limited, order.
Can I establish that everyone is in receipt of number 125 of 2019, statutory instrument? No. Okay, we will rectify that. Thank you. Motions. Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg to move the following motion standing in my name. Value-added tax, resolution of Parliament to approve draft value-added tax, amendment of Schedules 1 and 3 order. Whereas under Section 1091A of the Value-Added Tax Act, Cap 15.42, the Act, it is provided that the Minister responsible for finance may, by order published in the Gazette, amend the schedules to the Act. And whereas it is further provided under Section 1092 of the Act that an order made pursuant to Section 1091 of the Act is subject to an affirmative resolution of Parliament, except where the amendment is made to the customs tariff headings only. And whereas the Minister responsible for finance seeks approval of the draft value-added tax amendment of Schedules 1 and 3 order, to amend Schedules 1 and 3 of the Act by an affirmative resolution of Parliament, A, in the case of Schedule 1, I, under Item 1, to include a definition for the words educational supplies. 2, under Item 2.2, to include the supply of the service of printing of educational supplies as a zero-rated supply of service. B, in the case of Schedule 3, to exempt imports of personal items, food, clothing, toys, and other household commodities contained in barrels. Be it resolved that Parliament, by affirmative resolution, approves the draft value-added tax amendment of Schedules 1 and 3 order, which amends Schedules 1 and 3 of the Act. A, in the case of Schedule 1, I, under Item 1, to include a definition for the words educational supplies. 2, under Item 2.2, to include the supply of printing of educational supplies as a zero-rated supply of service. B, in the case of Schedule 3, to exempt imports of personal items, food, clothing, toys, and other household commodities contained in barrels. Madam President, the resolution before this Honorable House is to amend Schedules 1 and 3 of the Act. The amendment of Schedule 1 will allow educational supplies produced in St. Lucia to be VAT exempt, similar to educational supplies imported into St. Lucia. Educational supplies imported into St. Lucia are VAT exempt, whereas if they are produced or printed in St. Lucia for a third party, that production or printing is treated as a service and VAT is charged on that product. This puts production of educational services produced locally at a disadvantage, and in many cases encourages suppliers to import them as opposed to producing them locally. We all know that when goods are produced locally, this results in employment for our people, development and improvement of our skill sets, economic growth. Madam President, just to name a few of the benefits that we achieve when we produce our own supplies locally. So I believe we all here will agree that this is another step in the right direction where we are continuing to remove VAT, whether by 2.5% or by one item at a time. We are keeping to our promise, Madam President, to the people of St. Lucia with our 5 to stay alive. So we are immediately reducing the rate of VAT with a view to further reducing it until it is completely replaced by a more appropriate and affordable sales tax within our first 5 years. Madam President, in terms of Schedule 3 amendment, we are exempting the payment of VAT on Christmas barrels. This is a customary activity which allows friends, families, foreigners, flowers, laborers alike, everyone to send barrels, one or more, to their families coming from the diaspora and foreigners overseas. Madam President, these barrels go a long way in assisting our peoples to supplement their income and, of course, to make our Christmas festivities brighter. The terms and conditions associated with the waiver of VAT on the Christmas barrels will be in effect from November 15th, 2019, that is this coming month, up to January 31st of 2020. So that gives a lot of the people time to receive their barrels, as well as people who may not have intended to send anything. That may encourage them to send it because they will have time to get here before the deadline of January 31st. The conditions associated with this concession, Madam President, is 100% waiver of import duty on personal items, food, clothing, toys, and other household consumables contained in barrels. Electronic items, of course, as normal, is not included, or are not included. The number of barrels qualifying for concessions is 2 per household. The upper limit on the value per barrel is $2,500 EC per barrel on the items qualifying for the concession. Qualifying items must be for personal use and not for commercial use. The usual penalties and fines will apply if the goods are used for commercial purposes. Madam President, I present this amendment for the consideration of my fellow senators in this honorable House. Thank you.
Senators, the question is that Parliament, by affirmative resolution, approves the draft value-added tax amendment of Schedules 1 and 3 order, which amends Schedules 1 and 3 of the Act. A, in the case of Schedule 1, 1, under Item 1, to include a definition for the words educational supplies. 2, under Item 2, 2, to include the supply of printing of educational supplies as a zero-rated supply of service. B, in the case of Schedule 3, to exempt imports of personal items, food, clothing, toys, and other household commodities contained in barrels. Leader of Opposition Business, Senator Henry.
Thank you, Madam President, and I dare say good morning to fellow senators. And permit me to add my voice to the congratulatory remarks that were made with regards to those who went to Taiwan and participate and showcase such brilliance of our St. Lucian people. And of course, anytime our people are out there as St. Lucians to perform and demonstrate our skill and talent, I think it should be applauded by everyone. Whereas I wasn't aware in detail of the outgoing, however, the snippets of what I saw in terms of the parading of St. Lucians in Taiwan, I was extremely proud seeing that St. Lucians are out there, celebrating with a fellow country of ours. So congratulations and to all those who participated. I think these things makes us even better and stronger as a people. Madam President, with regards to the motion that is before the sitting of this Parliament, I wish to support the motion. And as I briefly state why, Madam President, permit me to just highlight that only Tuesday past, that the lower house debated such a resolution, and unexpectedly, and to the surprise of the opposition, that this motion generated much debate, and of course, which was just after a 3-minute presentation by the leader of the opposition in support of the motion of the Barretts. And I asked myself, Madam President, I stayed and I listened to the presentation made by the Prime Minister and all those, and there were some very important salient points made. And in keeping, Madam President, with this whole month of Creole, I will, from time to time, use my Creole in making just this brief presentation that would not take me more than 10 or 15 minutes. So I want to spare concern that I'm not here for long. Madam President, the emphasis was on VAT, the discussion in the Parliament, VAT. And I asked myself, following the debate, why the mere resolution of the ordinary or the usual allowance for persons to receive the barrels, why was there such a debate on VAT, as it were? And I had to conclude, listening to the members from the government side, that VAT was once used as a vehicle to get to political power. In fact, there was a lot of discussion about VAT in the last election. And again, as we approach a period of election, VAT again, the engine was being ignited. However, the presentation from the member for Mikud North, Beaufort North, the Honorable Musa Jabatis, in highlighting the historical context of VAT, actually flattened the tires of that vehicle, because he indicated that VAT really started by the UWP administration. The institutional arrangement for VAT was established by the UWP administration, and that the St. Lucia Labour Party government inherited a VAT office already established, cabinet conclusions establishing the amount of 15% for VAT, and therefore being responsible and accountable, move on with the implementation of VAT. But why VAT? Again, there was some other pronouncement made by the Prime Minister that they would be returning to this House, subsequently it was made mention, to also remove VAT, not just on the barrels as it were, but also on burial. Found that very interesting, that the government would be returning to remove VAT on burial. But Madam President, I recall vividly that the government indicated, following when they took office, and referencing the presentation by the Caribbean Development Bank, which indicated that the Labour Party had not implemented VAT efficiently because there were some basic food items that were without VAT. And therefore, the Prime Minister suggested that we should put VAT on basic food items and then target people specifically so that the wealthy people do not benefit from those basic food items. So I asked, why isn't he taking the same approach to burial? Is it that every person needs to receive VAT removed from burial? As far as I'm aware, Madam President, burial costs range from $5,000 to the $30,000 to $40,000+ in terms of the cost of burial of a loved one in St. Lucia. And I'm asking, is it because we are now approaching the silly season that those statements were being made? Or is there really a genuine concern about poor people? Why position yourself to add VAT to basic food items like chicken backs, flour, sugar, and issue poor people, as he indicated in the lower house, a card, poor people a card so that they would receive those benefits, but then decide that you're going to remove VAT on burial? So I ask, why be so concerned about the dead and not the living? That was the pronouncement made by the Prime Minister in the lower house on Tuesday. And in fact, he almost broke in tears to talk about the cost of burial. It was so outrageous and unfair that people need to bury their loved ones with VAT. But in the same breath, said that we need to put VAT on those items and issue for people an e-card. And he said that e-card they'll be able to identify themselves so that they could benefit. So I concluded that the Prime Minister probably preferred that we kill poor people with VAT and we bury them free of VAT, for want of a better word. I'm trying to carve it, but while people buy chicken backs, lentils, flour, sugar every day, and on that day, according to Martin Luther King Jr., when we have to be victimized by life's final common denominator, we call death. It is just one day in our life. On that day, we conclude. But every day we buy food. Every day we have to live. So I was a bit concerned as to where is this government heading with that. In the conclusion of his presentation, it was implied that VAT will be totally removed by the end of this administration term in office. I heard that. So VAT will be removed within by the end of that, on or before this administration removed from office. Again, I ask, why remove VAT when you are moving into election? Why keep VAT now? And then when you're about to move into election, you decide that you're going to remove VAT. But you made the promise before you entered into office. Isn't this just mere games? Est-ce moins paix? Well, I am afraid indeed. Because, but here are the facts made. The facts punctuated at the lower house, Madam President, was one, VAT institutional arrangement was by the UWP administration. Two, VAT was made 15% by the Cabinet of Ministers, and it was put into motion under the St. Lucia Labour Party. The other point that was made, Madam President, at the lower house, which is important for the discussion, is that the former Prime Minister and the member for Castries North did indicate and endorse the statement made, the historical statement made with regards to VAT. And that he said he stood by his position then and he stands by his position now as it relates to VAT. Seemed like a position not welcome, but I was pleased to have heard this. But more importantly, Madam President, it was asked, what has VAT done? Because now we consider removing VAT. And like I said, Madam President, I was surprised that the government side led the discussion along those lines in terms of what has VAT done to us. And I was told that it grew the economy. And
Senator Henry.
Yes, Madam President.
The substance of the debate at hand is that of VAT on educational supplies, services, and barrels entering St. Lucia. I have no problem with reference to what was said in the House below, but it should not be the substance of your discussion. So please move along.
Yes, thank you, Madam President. I intend to. I was just setting up the background for what I was about to say, Madam President, because certainly I'm guided by some of what was said in the lower house. So yes, Madam President, as it relates to the barrel issue and the removal of VAT, and of course the motion that is before us, and as it's written in the form of the resolution, it is captured that the minister responsible for finance seeks the approval of a draft value-added tax amendment of Schedule 1 and 3. And in the case of Schedule 1, it is to include a definition for the words educational supplies, so that printing, there isn't a double taxation or VAT being applied on items coming in that is being reproduced. And more importantly, under B, in the case of Schedule 3, is to exempt on the importation of personal items, food and clothing. Madam President, I've made the point with regards to the Prime Minister in addressing the House on this motion indicated that he's coming back for removing VAT on burial, and we've made the point with regards to that he intends to put VAT on basic food items. But I want to move on, Madam President, to the issue of the barrels. Madam President, since the inception in this Parliament, I've listened, and I'm aware that for the short time that I've spent here, the barrels initiative has been approved by all parliamentarians, even if it was an initiative conceptualized and conceived in the philosophy of the St. Lucia Labour Party. Yes. And this year, Madam President, even more important, I think I'm asking that those persons in the diaspora dig deep into their pockets and into their pantries and to help give to St. Lucians at this point in time. But just to pause, Madam President, at this time, that both members from Dennery North, Micoud South and Micoud North, the Prime Minister, highlighted the value of the diaspora as it relates to their relationship, not just on barrel, but to their givings to St. Lucians and to their constituents. And I think that was important, Madam President, because I am aware that the Prime Minister had a number of visits around the diaspora, and for what I've gleaned to listen, I did not hear any encouragement, I may be incorrect, as it relates to persons in the diaspora given. As a matter of fact, persons were made to believe that things are all good in St. Lucia. But we move on. So our families in the diaspora, we are asking them to dig deep at this point in time into their pockets, their pantries, their kitchen cupboards, and to give. As I conclude, Madam President, I want to focus on the aspect of giving. At this point in time, it's all as we move into the Christmas season, it's all about giving. And I dare say that some politicians, Madam President, will also be doing a lot of giving at this time. But I would like to remind us to be fair and reasonable and first give to those who are in need. And if there's anything left over, we can consider giving to our followers, our friends, family, and foreigners, in that order. Madam President, I would like to speak on those who are less fortunate, who probably would not receive or not able to get a barrel, and encourage those persons in the communities who are barrel recipients, that if you have already received a barrel and your neighbor or your parliamentarian is distributing food hampers, please ask your parliamentarian rep to pass on the hamper to a needy neighbor instead. Don't accept and deprive another family from enjoying Christmas. But to those who are packing up those barrels, there are some things, Madam President, I would like to see in the barrels. And there are some things that should be omitted from those barrels. Madam President, sugar and salt are not needed. They are not good for our health, especially given that our challenge is with no hospitals and some of them are incomplete. Madam President, I would like for those who are packing the barrels to include some painkillers and off-the-shelf medicine. That will also help. Madam President, preserved meats and canned tuna fish would be welcome. Send them, of course, because the fisheries complex, as we knew it before, is no longer. And the National Abattoir is earmarked to be demolished. Madam President, I would like for those who are packing the barrels to include some pampers for children and adults, as the NICE program would be happy to receive some, and our poor children would like to have some pampers. Madam President, in the barrels, if you include toys, let them be educational. I would advise that you do not put games that would encourage gambling and violence, because we have too much of that already to deal with in St. Lucia. Madam President, I would ask for those who are packing the barrels to include a single burner stove that can use kerosene, because fuel has gone up by almost 100%. Madam President, ask them to send laptops in the barrel if they can, use or new, for the government has cancelled the laptop programs. Madam President, and more importantly, the government, while they have cancelled the laptop programs, if recognizing that CXC is planning to bring the CXC exam through online means, so laptops would be welcomed in the barrels. And just a little chemical, Madam President, if they can, they should put into the barrels, because, of course, Madam President, some schools have mold and we are closing schools faster than it is in the month of August. All in the barrel, Madam President.
On a point of elucidation, Madam President, I am hearing the fellow senator talking about putting...
Madam President, I will continue my presentation because I'm just near completing. It's on a point of elucidation, just 2 more minutes before I'm finished.
Senator, I would like to advise you, though, that if you stick to the subject, the debate on the hand, you would choose some of your words more carefully.
Thank you, Madam President.
And you would also not infringe some of the exemptions that exist in the act that you are discussing.
Thank you very much.
Not even the act, the bill.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Thank you very much, and I do hope that nobody put anything that is against
Senator Mangal.
Madam President, on a point of order, I think that the member is misleading this Honorable House by indicating that he would like them to put in some kerosene because the price of fuel is going up by 100% or has gone up by 100%. The price of fuel has not gone up by 100%. And I also need to ask, what is kerosene? Is kerosene not fuel? So tell us.
Senator Mangal, please always start with what is your point of order.
Thank you, Madam President. My apologies, and I do withdraw if I asked to put kerosene in the barrel, not to put kerosene, but put a single stove that uses kerosene, if it's allowed. But Madam President, I did not ask to put kerosene. I asked for a single burner stove that uses kerosene. But leave that alone, Madam President. I'm nearing my presentation. But Madam President, more importantly, as our families in the diaspora prepare their barrels, I ask them to be watchful and be careful. Do not leave those barrels unattended. Let nobody put anything, because sometimes I hear that things we do not want comes into a barrel, like fire, weapons and what have you. So we have enough crime to deal with. Please be watchful with those barrels, that we do not have firearms coming in those barrels. And finally, Madam President, just important for us to show gratitude at all times. When those barrels come, it's always good to remember that the recipients of those barrels show gratitude to those who have made the sacrifice at this time to deliver them, and say thanks. So I wish every one of them would be receiving, but more importantly, continue to be a caring and sharing society. Thank you very much.
Senator Mangal.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Madam President, in this season of Creole Heritage Month, I would like to congratulate the Minister and the government of St. Lucia, and of course the Folk Research Center, on the presentation of yet another very successful Creole, Journée Creole, on Sunday just past. Madam President, I would also like to express my condolences to the family and friends of the late Gaspar Charlemagne, of course, who was a member of Parliament and a minister previously for this country. I would like to also express my condolences to the family and also to the Catholic Church on the passing of their beloved sister. Madam President, I stand to support this motion that is presented before us. Of course, to basically do two things. One, to amend the VAT value-added tax legislation to allow for the import of materials or stationery, paper, etc., for the purpose of, that has been used for the purpose of printing school supplies, to be zero rated. Madam President, for so long we have seen that, of course, I do support fully that educational supplies are made available to our people VAT-free. And of course, that's a anomaly where you are importing school books, and those school books are coming in VAT-free, but we would have our local manufacturers or printing establishments bringing in paper, or what would probably be used as the raw material for producing and printing stuff for the purpose of books for educational people, for our educational supplies, having to pay the full 12.5% VAT on those supplies, Madam President. Two things would happen. One, it means therefore that the books coming in from our overseas suppliers would be coming in at a significant advantage. Already we know that the cost of production in this country would be a lot higher because of our size and our resources. Those books would have been prepared and produced overseas a lot cheaper than we would be able to produce here. But yet still we would have the disadvantage of having to pay VAT on those supplies. So by zero rating the VAT, it means, therefore, that we would be more equitable. Although I still believe that we would not be able to compete totally or be at the same price, but at least it would assist our local printing establishments in being able to compete in this regard. Of course, it would also assist them where they would have had to pay VAT up front, that 12.5% up front. And certainly in doing so, you would be required in some cases to go for a loan and to be paying interest on an overdraft or on that loan, only to have those items stored in your establishment or in your warehouse for maybe 2 months, 3 months. And of course, that is revenue you could have utilized to do something else. Or it means that this is interest that you would not be required to pay had those items come in exempted in the first place. And that is, this is not new. I think this anomaly was recognized previously by the government of St. Lucia for the manufacturing sector, where raw materials, VAT was paid on raw materials coming in, and you have a production cycle. So you may be able to turn over those materials into a final product over a 90-day period, a 3-month period. But having to pay those items, having to pay that VAT in advance, or at the point in which those raw materials come in, it means basically you have goods sitting inside of your establishment, having paid VAT in advance, and it affects your cash flow. So the same thing was done for the manufacturing sector, where raw materials would have allowed to come in, etc., and they're being offset until the various goods being manufactured. And similarly, I do support the fact that this is being done as well for the printing industry, Madam President. On the issue of the barrels, this is something that has been done year after year and has been said before. It has been supported by all parliamentarians there, and likewise this time around I do expect it to be supported by all parliamentarians. It is a noble gesture on behalf of the government of St. Lucia in the season of giving and the season of gifts, Madam President, and certainly it would go a long way in assisting our households in being able to bring in the necessary toys, the necessary clothing and food items that are required for us to have a proper celebration of Christmas and New Year's. But Madam President, one should actually look at the significance of that contribution by the government of St. Lucia. All the time we hear about barrels being given VAT-free and duty-free. But what is exactly the contribution that the government of St. Lucia is putting in this? We've been told that it goes up to a ceiling of a CIF value, cost insurance rate value of 2,500 EC dollars per barrel. Now, assuming that the duty on those items would have been at 15%, so I just worked it out at 15%. 15% of $2,500 is $375, Madam President. The service charge being $150. Then, of course, you would have to compound that, add all of that together to get $3,025. And there, the VAT of 12.5% would be added or would be calculated based on that value added value. So value added really means your CIF value, your duty, and your service charge, all put in together, added together, to bring up that value to $3,025. So VAT on 12.5% of $3,025, Madam President, is $378.13. So really and truly, the savings per barrel would have been the $375 duty, because it's duty-free, and also the 12.5% of $378, coming up to a total of $753.13 per barrel. A household being allowed a total of 2 barrels. Therefore, if you multiply that by 2 and you were to maximize your benefits, you would be saving $1,506.26. So this is the contribution that the government of St. Lucia is giving to every single household in this country. And I think this is commendable and should be encouraged. But Madam President, I would still like to press the government in the future to go a little further. In the spirit of giving, and if we look at gifts, a gift is supposed to be entirely free. So I would make the suggestion that in the future, we could probably even look at the small service charge as well of the 6%, that we could add it in that basket and could totally tell someone when they come to the port, You don't need any money. You would be able to do so. We'll be able to totally give you service charge. Service charge. So I think, if I'm not mistaken, we still pay a small stipend when you go to the port, which is actually the service charge. So I think in the future, maybe we could also throw in the service charge inside of there and give someone a total gift. So say this is totally free for us. But we must remember that this goes a very long way, and I believe it also stimulates persons in the diaspora and our families overseas to be able to shop on our behalf and to be able to send those goods across here to us, Madam President. I heard a few things being said by the leader of the opposition business in this Senate, Madam President, and I think he cleverly tried to look at VAT and say, well, these are the things you should put in the basket, and try to attack this present government on many various fronts, Madam President. VAT.
Madam President, point of order. I did not attack.
Senator Henry. I have to call on you. As I said, we're recording. They won't know who's speaking. Senator Henry.
Point of order 35. Madam, I did not attack the government. I only made a presentation with regards to the VAT and what I think it should be included. So I have not attacked the government, and I would like that refrain. Thank you.
Senator Mangal, please state it differently.
Thank you very much, Madam President. But Madam President, I would like to establish what is the fact on a number of issues.
Senator Henry. Proceed.
Yes, Madam President. Looking at the issue of fuel in this country, the price of fuel in this country has not increased by 100%, and I would like to specify that. I would also like to clarify and to state that kerosene is indeed fuel. So when we are asking to have a kerosene stove inside that barrel instead, because the price of fuel have increased, if the price of fuel has increased by 100%, I would assume that the price of kerosene as well, being fuel, would have increased by 100%. So we need to be cautious on those matters, Madam President.
Senator Henry.
Madam President, the Senator did not withdraw the statement.
Senator Henry, on what point of order do you stand?
Madam President, I stand on the point of order 35.4. The Senator Mangal has not withdrawn the statement that I have not attacked the government. I would like it withdrawn.
Senator Mangal, please withdraw the statement or restate it differently.
Very well, Madam President. I was going by your direction that I should state it differently, which I did. But nevertheless, I would withdraw that that Senator Henry has attacked the government. But the fact remains, Madam President, those were the statements being made, that the schools have mold, and that, of course, we should put certain cleaning items in that basket or in that barrel because the school have mold. Did mold commence in St. Lucia in 2016, Madam President? Did those schools have mold from 2016? Did repairs, how much money was spent on repairs by the former government? $1 million, Madam President? This government is spending $10 million. What we are seeing in this country is an accumulation of repair work that was not done over a period of time, and therefore this government now is investing into into the school plant, is dealing with the problems. Obviously, the problems are so huge that we would not be able to deal with every single one at the same time, and this is why more money is required to be placed into the school plant. But nevertheless, Madam President, when the problems do arise, like in the case of the Entrepot School, the government of St. Lucia has moved swiftly. In the Methodist School has moved swiftly and has dealt with the problems for our people, for our teachers, and for our students. This is the difference. This is the difference. So we're not leaving it to our people, Madam President, to have things done.
Madam President.
Senator Henry.
45 limit of speech, Madam. The member is not rebutting. He's supposed to stick to the motion of the VAT being discussed. I think his presentation is more fitting for the leader of the government business.
Proceed, Senator Mangal. Just bear in mind that we're supposed to stick to the substance of the debate.
Yes,
and
Madam
that
President.
I will allow some
Yes. Yes, Madam President. So I really do not want to be long. So in conclusion, I will state that our people in this country are smart, they are wise, and I do not expect to see that they're bringing in kerosene stoves in that barrel, because they know better. They know that there's propane gas at an affordable price in this country, and they will bring a proper item that, of course, is non-electronic, as we specified, and of course that could be consumed and could do better for our people. I expect our people to shop wisely with food items, with educational items, with toys, with medicine. Yes, with medicine as well. Not that they are not available in our hospitals there, but those are the items. And that they will not take the suggestion of the opposition that they need to be looking into supplying things that the government of St. Lucia is quite capable and has been doing on behalf of this country. This government is a caring government, Madam President, and this government has been supporting our people, has been dealing with our issues in this country, and in this like manner, like I have said today, the government of St. Lucia continues the program of giving free for Christmas, $1,506.26 savings to every household in this country. That would bring in 2 barrels at the maximum value. So take good use of it, my people, and shop wisely. I thank you, Madam President.
Senator Ferdinand.
Thank you, Madam President. I greet our fellow senators and join you in extending condolences to the families of those loved ones who have passed on, particularly our former minister in the Ministry of Education and Culture, as well as the sister of the Roman Catholic Church. Since we are just about ending the month of October, with the Creole fever, the Creole festivities having just been held over the weekend, I believe that it is fair to say that most, if not all of our St. Lucian folk did in some way celebrate and show some, have some fun and enjoy the Creole festive weekend. And if I can just, you can allow me leave to just divulge in a little bit of Creole, to say, moi, t'es bien content, nous tous amusés comme nous, et puis nous célébrer à Creole, fête Creole, journée Creole, week-end passé, et bien finissement 8 semaines passées. Et puis, dans toutes ces communes-là, je dis aussi, en commune Blanchard, Desruisseaux, Tirocher, Lacoville, Diga, Chic, et puis Soiseil, Gozilé, et puis Vieux-Fort. Madam President, it is always refreshing to hear that other cultures, as the Minister did mention, appreciate and have quite a lot of regard for what is truly St. Lucian and what we celebrate. To the substantive motion, Madam President, the resolution sought to make an amendment to specific schedules, and if I can just refer to A in the case of Schedule 1, under Item 1 to include the definition of the words educational supplies in the resolution, and Section A, Roman numeral 2, under Item 2 to include the supply of the service of printing and educational supplies at a zero-rated supply of service. Very significant, Madam President. It also be considered the schedule of imports of personal items and barrels and so on. Madam President, this morning I just want to confine my short presentation to one specific area of the resolution before us. I am doing so because I believe that in all of the discussion that we have had on this amendment, that I am very disappointed in the treatment that has been given to an area of this amendment or an area of this resolution that I believe is extremely important to a specific area, a specific category of persons in this country. We have heard of all types of discussions. Yes, in the last sitting, in the lower house. We heard the discussion even this morning. There's been quite a lot of discussion on, especially on the barrels, and I have no difficulty with that. I believe that the barrels and what should be in it and what should not be in it is okay. I believe it's welcome. And whatever the government can do, which of course the Labour Party government did embark on, and whatever any subsequent government can do to allow St. Lucians to benefit from the remittances from their relatives abroad and any other benefit will obviously be something I welcome. But I am very disappointed, Madam President, that whereas the resolution makes specific reference to inclusion of educational supplies, printing material and so on, we have had very little discussion on that specific issue. Not even from the minister responsible for education. I was happy to hear that the leader of government business this morning allude to it, but basically in mentioning it. Madam President, I believe that when we as a government, as a people, seek to provide relief in any form, that we must always remember those who need it most. And when we have an amendment that includes educational supplies, not even being given any treatment, I believe that we have to become very concerned and ask ourselves, what is really our priority? What is our focus? In a situation where we're discussing educational supplies, we did not even go into a discussion about what types of educational supplies should we also consider. I heard my colleague, Senator Mangal, mention a couple of things that we can consider. But did anybody give thought to what other educational supplies that we should probably consider in subsequent amendments? For example, can we start thinking about including school books, exemptions on school books? Because educational supplies include school books. We did have printing material and so on. And I know it's going to be a very difficult decision for any government to make, considering the revenue that is generated from school books. But I'm just saying, what is the level of discussion that is being engaged, that we are engaging in on that specific area? Madam President, I really think that the treatment given to educational supplies in this specific resolution has been sort of en passant, and I'm very disappointed in that. I believe that consideration can be given, as the previous government did, in providing the $500 bursaries to every student who succeeded the common entrance exam. That was a gesture of assistance being offered. And so if the step had been taken to alleviate the situation for parents who have children who have succeeded the exam and are ready to go to secondary school, why wasn't there more discussion on that specific aspect of the resolution? If you follow the discussion, Madam President, so far, almost everyone was, almost all the discussion, particularly from the members who presented it from the government side, was focused on the barrels. And I am not saying that it's not important, but it was only one of the three areas that the resolution spoke to. And I believe at this point we need to be careful that when we engage in debate and discussion in this Honorable House on matters that impact our population, that we begin to show a little more consideration for our young people. Our young people are beginning to speak out in many ways on matters that affect us in the country. And when we come to this Honorable House to pass legislation, amend legislation, and make any pronouncements that is in their best interest, we need to give it the kind of treatment that it deserves. Yes, they benefit from the barrels too, because when barrels come in, the children in the household do benefit. But I think the fact that the resolution actually pointed out specific clauses and areas that refer to educational supplies, I really believe that it should have gotten some treatment, particularly since the minister responsible for education sits among the members of the lower house. And so, Madam President, I wanted to make that observation and to say that I believe that our legislators, our lawmakers, our members of government who are responsible must take those areas a little more seriously. Now, I don't want to get involved too much in the previous discussions, but just two observations I've made. Madam President, the $10 million that was made reference to a while ago when the issue of what should be included in the barrel was mentioned by my colleague. We have no issue with any amount of benefits that are going to come for improving the situation for our young people. But all I will say on that is that it appears to me that what less than $1 million could have done is not being bettered or improved with even $10 million. $1 million was done, there was mold in the school. I will never say that there wasn't. The school that I was principal of, we had issues there as well. We are boasting about $10 million being put into school infrastructure. We still have mold. So maybe it's not about the amount we put. It's probably about how it's been dealt with, how it's been administered. So, Madam President, I just want to highlight the specific point this morning that I believe in all the discussion. We mentioned gas prices, we mentioned horse racing, we mentioned hospitals, we mentioned healthcare. All of those things were part of the discussion. I even heard other things that I don't. Okay, I think it's okay now. Yes. So, Madam President, I think it was the member for Castries North who attempted to give some treatment to the area that I refer to. So it is rather unfortunate that up to this point...
Senator, I remind you, or I remind this House, that we are not here to admonish the House below. We are here to make submissions in this chamber about the debate at hand. If that is the basis of your submission, I will ask you to stop and go back to what is to be discussed, which is the resolution. As I said before, I have no problem in reference, but this sounds like a continuous admonishment of what happened in the House below.
Sure how it was interpreted, but I'm saying, even this morning, let's leave the House. Madam President, even the mic is... Anyway, as I was saying, Madam President, let's leave the lower house issue alone. I want to state categorically in this chamber that even this morning we have had 3 presentations on this issue. I am not going to distinguish government or opposition. I am just saying that as a Senate, in this House, as people responsible for legislating and putting in legislature in this country, as leaders, we ought to show a little more regard, perhaps a lot more regard for matters that impact our children and young people. I do not think that we have given sufficient treatment to these 2 areas of this resolution that specifically impact students and persons or stakeholders of education. And I think this is the substantive issue that I have with this resolution. I think I stand in support of it, Madam President. I think it is a good move by any government. I stand in support of the resolution. But I'm saying that this is one issue that I think we need to address. And I'm hoping that in subsequent resolutions of that type, that all of us make the effort to ensure that we give it the type of treatment that it deserves on behalf of our children and the future of our country. I thank you, Madam President.
Senator Thomas Francis.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Madam President, I would like to echo the tributes that were paid this morning to deceased Mother Mariana Pinto and Teacher Gaspar, as we affectionately called him in Soufriere. Mother Pinto has left behind many friends and many loved ones who appreciated the tremendous value and tremendous service which she provided to this country in the area of education as well as through the Catholic Church. And I'd like to take this opportunity to extend my sincere condolences to the Catholic community, her friends, and her loved ones. Teacher Gaspar was a Soufriere icon, a true son of the soil, whom we love dearly, whom we admired profoundly for the tremendous service that he gave to education in Soufriere, as well as to the country generally. He also gave tremendous and meritorious service to the church. He was our organist in the Catholic Church in Soufriere for over 60 years. He gave selfless service for 60 years, Madam President, and he will be very dearly missed by his Soufriere people as well as myself. I would like to extend condolences to his family, the Soufriere community, his friends, and of course to all of us within these chambers. I would like to ask that the Almighty to bless his soul and bless the soul of Mother Pinto so that they can rest in eternal peace. Madam President, I also want to take this opportunity to congratulate all our St. Lucians who participated in the events that happened in Taiwan, the celebratory events that happened in Taiwan recently. I watched the parade via social media, Madam President, and I was beaming with pride. I shed a tear, but that was tears of joy, Madam President, because I was so very proud of our people, so very proud. And let's give a round of applause to our iconic senator here who was instrumental in putting together such a wonderful and spectacular parade. Well done, sir. Well done. Madam President, in keeping with Journée Creole, today is the last day of Creole Heritage Month. If you permit me, I will make my presentation partly in Creole, Madam President. Madam President, turning to the motion before us, I have absolutely no difficulty with what is being proposed. My understanding is that in terms of the relief, the tax relief on education supplies that are being imported into the country, the motion seeks to put some level of fairness and equity between persons who are importing books, educational supplies into the country, and persons who are actually importing material for producing educational supplies in this country. And once we're talking about equity and fairness, I am in support, and I believe the leader of government business gave enough detail around the benefits of the relief that is being provided to the manufacturing sector. So, Madam President, I will not spend a whole lot of time there, but I only want to mention here that there are other sectors that do require relief, and I would like to mention specifically one of those sectors. I do know that tour operators do benefit from duty-free concessions when they import vehicles. This morning we were presented with a statutory instrument where Nico's Touring, for example, got relief for importing 10 vehicles. Of course, Nico's is a touring company. However, it's my understanding that we have taxi drivers who purchase vehicles, they import vehicles for providing service to the tourism sector. And a lot of those drivers, they are part of associations on the island, but they have to pay duty on those vehicles. And I believe there is an opportunity for looking at providing some form of relief to the taxi operators who give great service to our visitors. I do recall that historically, taxi drivers enjoyed 100% concession on importation of vehicles, but for some reason, this concession was suspended. And I'm not sure why that was so, but I believe this is an area that needs to be revisited. Madam President, in terms of the concession on barrels, this is a routine exercise. We've been coming here every year to approve concessions on barrels. I have no difficulty with that. I understand the tremendous value that these barrels create for the indigents in this country. Those persons who are marginalized and look forward to having some sort of relief, especially during Christmas time. Persons who are looking to have a balanced meal, because there are lots of people in this country, Madam President, who are not as fortunate as some to enjoy decent and balanced meals and proper nutrition every single day. And the relief that we give at Christmas time is very welcome. I can say to you, Madam President, that I too look forward every Christmas to the concessions, because I do have relatives overseas who send barrels down to provide relief to dependent relatives of ours. And I see the smiles, I see the welcome in their faces and in the comments that they make, and every year. So I look forward to seeing those benefits come into fruition again this year. So I have absolutely no difficulty with those concessions. Only one thing I would like to add, Madam President, since we have been coming to this honorable house for quite a while, seeking approval for concessions on barrels, I believe the time is probably opportune for us to concretize this by passing, passing a bill, a motion that will ensure that we don't come here every year doing the same thing. If we do come back, Madam President, it should be about enhancing it as opposed to coming every year to this house to ask for permission or to debate whether we should or shouldn't give relief to the indigents of this country. Madam President, moi te vle di comme que tous les années nous ka vini ici, nous ka vini demander permission, gouvernement ka vini demander permission pour buy duty free concession à sous barrel. L'année chaise je cette ici qui pas ni means pour soin koyo bien, et puis tous les années yo ka espérer famille yo, et puis gens yo voye ti barrel là-bas yo pour yo manger plus mais les Noël ka passé. So many pièces difficulty et puis motion là nous ka debate là. Moi même ni famille moi ni famille qui ka dépend à sous moi à sous l'autre famille nous pour trouver support parce yo ni maladie, yo ni différentes situations côté yo passe à point ka koyo et puis famille nous même ka vrai barrel sorti l'autre pays pour aider ces monde ça là et moi ka ouais là yo trouver ces barrel là manière yo ka content so tous les années à décembre yo ka espérer pour ti barrel la venir tout ces ti barrel la venir puis yo amuser koyo soin koyo enjoy koyo et puis moi content d'être nous ka faire ci. Mais moi, just voulais dire, tous les années, nous avons venu faire même bagay là. Ça, c'est un bagay qui c'est tellement important. Moi, il est pour nous faire ça permanent. Il est pour nous juste dire, c'est comme ça hier, tous les années, il est comme ça. Et puis, si nous vivons en caille comme c'est pour nous dire, comment nous faire plus meilleur. Mais pas pour nous venir là, tous les années, qui dit, est-ce pour faire. Parce que quand on dit, est-ce pour faire, son bagay, nous pas même supposé qu'à dire. Madam President. So On that note, I would like to thank you for this opportunity, Madam President. Merci. Merci beaucoup.
Senators, the Creole language is ours, so there's absolutely no need to ask me each time for permission to say a few words in Creole. In fact, our standing orders allow occasional explanations, not just for emphasis, in Creole. So please, let's remember it's ours. There's no need. Senator Auger.
Merci, Madam President. Madam President, I would like to associate with the earlier comments of condolences on recent losses in our community, particularly the Catholic community and the Soufre community, as mentioned earlier. Madam President, the business of exemptions of duties and taxes on barrels at Christmas time is a wonderful thing. And it is nice that we come here each year and associate ourselves with such goodwill. But I would also like to ask for some longer-term consideration related to this matter. If we are in a situation where at Christmas time we have to provide special and exceptional relief to our people so that they can eat properly, we have a more fundamental economic problem of taxation in the country. We are talking about exemption of duties and taxes on basic household commodities so that they can become suddenly affordable for the poor. That signals a deeper problem in our tax and border policies, where, by assumption, we can surmise that these basic items are not normally affordable. And I would like to say with a lot of caution that the thought that we should, at Christmas, make life suddenly affordable for the poor is a rather paternal and old-fashioned notion which we need to address. The point is, we have a punitive tax system, particularly at our borders, where we are making life overly expensive, where we are making inputs to production overly expensive, where we are making our entire economy less competitive than it should be. And I believe that it is time for us to revisit our system of border taxes, particularly the incidence that it has on the productive sectors, on the one hand, and on the general population with regard to nutrition and health on the other. We are living in a time when incomes are not appreciating substantially, particularly for the lower income brackets, and life is especially hard. And for us to suddenly be caring and sympathetic at Christmas, I think that's a rather old-fashioned notion. Let us look at our taxes at the border. Let us ask ourselves whether or not our current system is, especially for customs, at persons and for people arriving from overseas, for example, whether we cannot look at the personal exemptions a little bit more substantially, whether we should not be looking at some flat rates, for example, for barrels. So maybe the processing fee for a barrel is $25 and that's it, or $50, whatever is reasonable and logical, and that is it. And we have a normal exemption which looks at personal allowances and decides that there are certain levels of taxation which are no longer justified in today's economic environment. We also need, Madam President, to consider whether or not customs at our airport is primarily a security function or a revenue function. Because we continue to penalize our people, in my view, for shopping abroad, rather than looking at a reasonable personal allowance on an annual basis, which I don't think has received much attention for some time and needs some kind of realistic adjustment, so that when you're coming in, people are not looking at every chocolate and ballpoint pen that you bought while you were on vacation. I would like to particularly appeal to the tax authorities to re-examine the punitive nature of our tax system, because for many businesses, and I think of small and large businesses, by the time you add up the cost of importation of particularly raw materials or items that are going to be part of any other process as opposed to end goods, you are facing 50, 60, 70% increases in the cost of goods. Also, Madam President, we need to look at what is happening with tariffs worldwide. It is an accepted economic philosophy that border taxes should be coming down, and that the worldwide trend towards lower external tariffs is good for economic growth, is good for global trade, and in a trade-dependent economy like ours, where we have no choice but to import many of our inputs, the business of special and exceptional exemptions needs to be revisited to a more broader policy where you are lowering the cost of living and the cost of life for most persons across the economy, and particularly for the productive sectors. What we have now is a system where the state apparatus is financing its inefficiencies and all its other needs by taxing everyone at the border. And we need to look at the fact that we have one of the most expensive regimes, both for the importation and exportation of goods. And on the exportation side, it is particularly damning for our economy because we are one of the highest cost jurisdictions with regard to the export and import fees, particularly on containerized goods. So we cannot expect our economy to grow if we continue to have these punitive taxes. And the way the taxes are calculated.
Senator Ogier?
Yes, ma'am.
I remind you that I allow a certain amount of latitude on matters other than the substantive debate at hand.
Yes, Madam
So
President.
please move along.
Yes, Madam President. Heard and heeded. I think I have made my point that we need a substantial review of the border tax system because it is currently punitive. Thank you, Madam President.
Honorable Minister for Home Affairs, Justice and National Security.
Thank you, Madam President. Good afternoon to my colleague senators. Madam President, I would like to associate myself with your comments with regards to the passing of Mother Pinto and our brother Gaspar Charlemagne. Senator Francis gave a little history of Minister Charlemagne, and I think what she did say was exactly what I knew about this great gentleman from Soufrière. I had opportunities to interact with him, and I always found him to be a very kind soul. So our condolences go out to the Catholic fraternity and to the family of Brother Gaspar Charlemagne. Before going any further, Madam President, I want to beg your indulgence for just a couple of minutes to give a little preview of what I really want to come down to. And persons on the other side did in fact discuss it as to the history of the VAT. And I wanted to thank Honorable Moses Jean-Baptiste for the excellent manner in which he presented the history of the VAT. I also want to compliment Honorable Stephenson King for taking the responsibility of being the one who was looking into the implementation of the VAT. But persons must always understand that proposing an amendment or proposing a tax is not the same in implementing. And I think at the time, the rest of the Caribbean, of which we are members, the CARICOM and OECS, were given that sort of panacea that the VAT was going to be our savior to all the issues we have when it came to finances. And all the other countries, Jamaica, Grenada, St. Vincent, Barbados, and others, went ahead and implemented the VAT. It was then our turn to do so. But unfortunately, we didn't have the time, and Dr. Anthony, who incidentally described the VAT as an oppressive tax, was the one who initiated it. I think at the time the Chamber of Commerce and other persons were not too pleased at the level of the 15%, because this country was not at a stage that it was doing well financially. And they were proven correct, because during his 4.5 years as Prime Minister, the economy never grew. We made a proposal under our 5 to Stay Alive that we would reduce VAT, and eventually our intention is to remove VAT completely. We have done that by taking out 2.5%, which really is 16%. To come to the substantive matter, I also wanted to speak to our colleagues here that every time a piece of legislation comes before this House, we seem to try to subvert or to interpret the law better than the drafters of the law. And I want to tell us that we as laypersons will only read the law literally. There are 3 rules of the law: the literal rule, the mischief rule, and the golden rule. As laypersons, we should read the law as it is given to us. And if you look at what the Act says here, the motion says here, under item 1, by inserting in the correct alphabetical sequence the following definition: educational supplies means a supply of printed material as defined under custom tariff heading 4901. We then have to find out what the custom tariff is all about, but we don't have it here, so we can't really discuss it. So the law is only trying to create or to correct a mischief that was in that piece of law. And by doing that, we are now allowing educational material to enter. Honorable Gideon, not I think Gideon or Fabian, no, it was here. Same thing. Ferdinand, sorry, Ferdinand. Senator Ferdinand, my apologies. Talked about he not seeing education school books, but that's implied. That's implied. The drafters would not.
On a point of order, Madam President, I believe the member has misrepresented.
What point of order, Senator?
35. I think the member has misrepresented what I said. What I actually said was that it would be better if we had a discussion.
What is the point of order on, Senator?
Yeah. 36A, Madam President. I think the member is suggesting that I indicated that school books are not included. I was just saying that we should consider, right? I was not
Senator,
suggesting
36A allows you to point to us to the standing order that is being infringed. It does not allow you to just state.
That should be on a point of elucidation. Yes.
Now,
36B
it
on a
is
point of
important because you know what can occur if you are on a point of elucidation. That's why you need to be clear exactly which point of order on which you stand. Proceed, Senator.
So, Madam President, if I may, on a point of elucidation, for the benefit of my colleague, the point I made during my presentation was to suggest that as the resolution was presented, the school books could be for consideration. It's something that could have been considered, because I did also indicate that right now it may be an issue, it's expensive, but it could be considered, and it should have had more discussion on that area. I'm not suggesting that it was not implicit in the resolution as is. My point was that it should be something that deserves more discussion. Okay? So I didn't want it to be misconstrued. Of course, school books are implied in educational supplies.
Thank you, Madam President. But honestly, I didn't understand what what the senator was saying.
Minister for Home Affairs, Justice and National Security.
Thank you very much, Madam President. And I was just trying to explain that you will not find everything listed down. Educational supplies, supplies, it's there. The drafters will not put school books, will not put newspaper, will not put these things. These things are implied. And that is why we read it literally. And it is there now to correct the mischief that our local persons who produce books, who write newspapers, couldn't compete with newspapers from overseas, and so on. So that is what it is. I'm just trying to educate you. I want to associate myself with the comments made by our independent Senator Francis. I think that was very, very, very good, in that there are more areas where we can look at in giving relief to our people in St. Lucia. And this is what this government has decided to do. Senator, why don't I remember the names this morning? Huh? Adrian, sorry, Senator Auger. I want to tell you that I totally agree with you when it comes to taxes at the border. I think it is prohibitive, and it is time that we look at other ways of dealing with imported goods and even exports. The Prime Minister has been at pains to indicate that he does not understand what customs is doing at the airports and our seaports. That every little thing that somebody brings in, that they dig into your bag, spend about half an hour searching, and then at the end of the day to charge you for a little laptop or a little Kindle or something like that. So that is within our remit. We understand it and we know that. The AG office is actually looking into some of those anomalies, and hopefully we will be able to bring this to fruition as soon as possible. So I want to associate myself with this bill, and I want to again reiterate what the opposition leader said to our persons who are going to receive barrels, and especially persons who are packing the barrels, that we should not put any illegal substances or any firearms into those barrels. We are a country that has now been run over by firearms, and we need to make sure that we do not import any firearms in those barrels. If the barrels do come in and the weapons are found, serious action will be taken against the persons that come to collect those barrels. I do think that it is time that, as the Senator said, that we get away from coming here every year and to be going through the same process, and some of us using this opportunity for political aggrandizement, that we make the necessary legislative change so that we know for a fact that our people are taken care of year-round and not at special occasions like Christmas. I thank you.
Senator Jean-Pierre.
Madam President, fellow senators, I stand to lend my voice to this motion. I would also like to express condolences on behalf of those that have passed away in the persons of Brother Gaspar Chalmain, somebody I was associated with for a short time, and also the Catholic community. I believe that the motion before us has value, and we should support in every way to make life easier for our people. But sometimes I have difficulty when I single out myself personally, and when I sit and I have to look at the questions of certain sectors that are being provided by our administration. Sometimes the fuel is in you and you have to speak. I would like to allude to my fellow senator. I think I know much more about the taxi sector than her. And it's surprising that she raised the issue of concession being given to tour operators and tour companies, whereas individual taxi drivers like me not receiving concession for the very same job. At the end of the day, you can imagine, Madam President, that when we purchased a vehicle for $52,000 in 1990, in 2019, we are paying $180,000 for it. And you can understand that same vehicle today, our colleagues are being paid the same fee from those tour operators for the last 21 years. So I rest my case. I would like to move on. We will dwell with this one at some other time. Again, it is not only because of maybe the government, but it is because of the poor representation of the people that we have elected in the taxi sector to represent us. That is where the problem lies. The minibus sector have left the taxi sector behind in miles. Just to permit me, Madam President, to digress just for a slight second.
Senator, I gave you some latitude already, and I was just about to refer you to 37.1.
Madam President, I believe since I had time to ask permission before you call to my attention, I think you should allow me a split second.
So let me just remind you that we should be dealing with the debate at hand, and that I don't want to run out of patience in it.
I concur,
Proceed.
I concur, Madam President. School supplies, barrels are all within our purview. I listened to my fellow senators, and I wish not to repeat all that have been said. I think the leader of opposition business tried his utmost to share some significant points, and I think remittance has always been and will always remain a significant part and dependence of our people. We who have our people in North America or in Europe knows the significance of remittance. However, Honorable Leader of Opposition Business, you made mention of the dead. Madam President, through you, I would like to remind the Honorable Leader of Opposition Business that the dead does not pay the VAT. It is the living that pays the VAT on behalf of the dead. If the Prime Minister says that he's going to relieve the VAT on the dead, I think it's a good gesture, because it's still the living that pays the VAT, not the dead. So, however, I believe that the concession given at Christmas or the period prior and after Christmas to our people with regards to the barrel is good, significant. But, Madam President, moi n'y a un problème. Et problème là moi n'y a c'est jamais ma jomel. Quand il y a un gros problème because les descend vieux fort pour aller collecter barrel là. Là n'y a un pont, y a un pour jambe qui ni 50 l'année, 50 years. and that bridge will collapse very soon. My people at Majomel, the roads at Majomel is horrible and deplorable. I think we need to look at the Majomel Road, and I need to make mention of it here. Reason being that I hear minibuses striking for the sake of bad roads. But however, the people of Majomel cannot strike because they only have one road they can pass through, and we need to look for that. Madam President, I am happy to be associated with this resolution, and I think I support Senator Oji 100% that we should not just look at every case in point at Christmas or look at it in isolation, but if we look at the broader picture, it will make life easier for everybody. Moi vle di, nous tenons bon journée créole, et moi quoi, Soazey fait justice pour cette lycée et pour Folk Research Center pour raison qui yo pas te vle tirer journée créole activity Soazey. Et moi quoi Soazey fait justice. Moi quoi Gap de Wisso a fait justice because Gap de Wisso a été JIC primaire organisé et plus bien passé vieux fois même qui c'était en host community. Jordia qui dernier jour en mois héritage créole nous en cette lycée octobre, moi je veux prendre opportunité pour dire que département qui était cette lycée et Folk Research Center en particulier fait un bon travail en mois ça pour Tchébé qu'il était nous en l'air et moi crois qu'il était à vivant cette lycée et que nous supposons continuer et qu'il était because langue créole c'est langue maman nous et nous supposons Tchébé. Thank you, Madam President.
Madam Deputy.
So we have government ministers, opposition senators, independent, I don't know what it is.
Right, that's where you have to represent the people of London.
So, shall I go in?
Honorable Minister in the Ministry of Tourism, Information, Broadcasting, Culture and Creative Industries, responsible for culture and creative industries.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I am just rising to support the motion before us this morning. I listened to the comments made by the opposition earlier, and I just want to say that it is so unusual for the opposition to support. Hence the reason why we have that level of discourse here this morning. And you know, I yes, I think it's very unusual for you to support. And so, even in listening to the constructive debate that was presented earlier by Senator Mauricia, I sought to get some information with respect to those barrel concessions in particular. And the records are showing, or the information is showing, that this government of the people, for the people, and by the people, has a very good track record in terms of dealing with this matter on time. for the people of this country. And so this is the first time in 9 years that we are coming this early to the House on this matter. And to add, maybe I don't want to say insult to injury for you, Senator Mauritius's comments is where we are at. Looking now at how we can institutionalize this in a way that we don't come back and play games with the people by dragging it to December and dragging it, later on, depending on how we feel as politicians. So we are very happy with where we are with this. And of course, our government, the people's government, the government that is concerned about everyone in this country, is coming at this point in time early enough to give our citizens the opportunity to get their business done on time for Christmas, you understand, for their friends and for friends, family, and of course, the rest as you know it. So, Madam President, I want to just say, I want to commend our team for the work that has happened and is happening. I want to assure my colleague Senator that we are still working on the policy for the incentives for the taxi drivers, and that will come in good time. We always try to deliver in good time for the people of St. Lucia. We don't wait for the opposition to give us directives, but we move to our time based on the plans that we have set for the development of this country. That's my few 2 cents on this matter, Madam President, and I want to encourage St. Lucians to take advantage and move speedily to alleviate having too much pressure being placed on our authorities at the border when the barrels come. Thanks.
Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, thank you, Madam President. I'm going to try to respond to some of the comments that were made. I want to first assure, Senator Thomas, that her statements are well taken, and Senator Belrose has already articulated the plan, the government's plan, in terms of addressing the whole barrel issue coming every year, and, asking for consideration of this House to give concessions for the barrel. So that is already on the table in terms of discussions in the cabinet, at the cabinet level. And of course, the legislators are going to do what is necessary to see that we do not continue along those same lines. Senator Oje, of course, I must agree that our taxation system is very punitive, especially when it comes to importation of goods. And this is why you see there is so much emphasis on the removal of VAT, because we recognize that, it is really a heavy burden on the people, on manufacturers, on everybody else. And at a time when our economy was experiencing very high inflation, we were experiencing high unemployment, high levels of poverty, a very high deficit. Everything, all our economic indicators at the time were very, very negative. And at that time, the former administration imposed a 15% VAT. So that did a lot of damage to the country, to our economic development. And in spite of all the talk and all the stuff about surfing around it, it was a very, very, drastic, draconian measure to take at that point in time in our economic development. It really stagnated the economy even more than it was already stagnating, and that set St. Lucia back a few years in terms of development. Anybody in their right mind, when you look at the indicators, will agree that this is what the 15% imposition of VAT did. So I think we need to cut out the back and forth. Let us just agree that this thing was a draconian measure. Maybe we did not really consider the impact on our society. I do not think that the excuse that it started with the Labour Party or the United Workers' Party is an argument at all. Because usually people have to put things on the table, discussions take place, you look at strategies, you look at the way forward, and then you implement. What is important there, Madam President, about that VAT is the implementation of the VAT and the timing of the implementation of a 15% VAT. That is what was important. You say that we started it. We started it, but we did not implement the 15% VAT. We did not implement the 15% VAT. It was implemented under the former administration, Madam President. And we promised, Madam President, we promised the very first one in our 5 to Stay Alive that we would reduce the VAT as soon as we came into office. And that is what we have done. And we are continuing to reduce the VAT, whether it is one item at a time or by a percentage at a time. We are continuing to reduce the VAT because it is very important, Madam President, for us to find other ways and means of assisting our people, assisting our economy to grow, instead of that VAT that we have imposed on, on people, on the manufacturing sector, and on all our people. So I believe that it is time that we, at least in the House, agree that VAT was not good for our economy, and we have to find ways and means of getting around that. Madam President, to my fellow Senator, Mr. Jean-Pierre, I see he's representing his people. He's representing his sector, and he's doing so very well. But I want to assure him that concessions for the taxi sector is on the way. There is much discussion at the cabinet level about how we should go about assisting our people in the taxi sector. He has a very strong ally in the cabinet. So he must not be afraid. I want to assure him that his soulagement is coming, and he has someone in our cabinet that is really rallying to see that that is done. But when we do it, we want to make sure that it is equitable and that there is proper balance. In terms of roads, of course, you know that we are struggling with that because we came and found actually no network system for our roads. And there was no money either to take care of the roads. So it is taking a little time, but eventually we will get to everybody, Madam President. We will get to all the roads that needs fixing in our country because, of course, we rely on tourism. These people have to go from the international airport usually all the way down to the north. So we are very cognizant of the fact that we need to fix our roads for our people as well who commute on a daily basis. Madam President, I heard mention that the Prime Minister did not give sufficient attention to thanking the diaspora for the barrels that they are sending and so on. The Prime Minister has actually visited our people in the diaspora and said so to them in person. So I do not know what more it would take to let them know that they are appreciated, what they are doing for our people and for their families here. We appreciate it, and that it is going a long way into helping our people, go about their daily lives. So I think that is taken care of. And of course, my fellow Senator Francis spoke about being careful about what people put in those barrels, because we read the terms and conditions, and of course, we cannot have certain things placed in those barrels, especially electronic items. Electronic appliances and items, yes. Madam President, the substance of the resolution here speaks to educational supplies, including the definition for the words educational supplies. And then it went on to mention, include the supply of services of printing of educational supplies as a zero-rated supply of services. The Schedule 1 focused on that, on educational supplies, Madam President. And this is why I believe there was not much discussion about that, because it is so very clear. The schedule itself, the amendment itself states what it is about, educational supplies. And books are educational supplies, Madam President. So I do not think that we need an added definition or to go about and include books, because it is already included. In my mind, this is one of the first items you think of when you think of that amendment. So those producers who want to produce books locally, print them and so on, these are really the people that this is meant to assist. So definitely books are covered. I want to assure you, Senator Francis, Senator Ferdinand, that books are covered under this amendment. Okay? So you cannot fuss about something that's already there, and it's so glaring. Right? So, Madam President, I believe that I have covered most of the issues. I heard somebody speak about the fisheries complexes no more. Let me assure my fellow senator, if he goes today to the fisheries complex, he will be able to go there and buy his fish and go home and enjoy a nice fish broth. That is open. Well, you should go there today, because I can assure you, you will get service if you go there.
You sure you're from the institution?
Of course, at the time when we came in, Madam President, the fisheries complex had no environmental health license. There was no license.
Imagine that.
So they had to apply for the license, and now they have been granted the license to operate, and everything is back on top of, above board. They are licensed and they are operating. My fellow senator, you keep talking about the hospitals. While this resolution does not speak to hospitals, Madam President, my fellow senator has asked about the fisheries complex. I've responded to him. My fellow senator is now talking about hospitals. And I have to say that when the 15% VAT was introduced, because this is about VAT, Madam President, we had no health insurance. We still do not have health insurance. Our hospitals were in a deplorable state, Madam President. And all our healthcare institutions were falling apart. So were our schools. There was no maintenance going on in this country. Even in this very building where we stand, Madam President, we have had to make a lot of renovations. And even as we speak, there are sections of this building we have had to close down. We are not even sure how safe we are in this very house, because we do not know where the mold has penetrated to behind the cardboards, behind the boards and so on, and under the carpet. So the mold did not start today. The hospitals did not start falling apart today. Madam President, is it a problem we have in this country where our structures were not being taken care of? There was no maintenance going on under the former administration, and as a result, we are seeing what is happening today. But this government,
Senator Henry.
Point of elucidation, Madam President. Can I reference the Office of the
Madam
Director's
President,
Audit?
if I may continue with my presentation.
Proceed, Leader of Government Business.
But read your maintenance report.
Your mic, Senator.
Like I was saying before, I was so rudely interrupted, Madam President, maintenance is a problem in our country.
Senator,
but this administration...
Senator, may I remind you that it is his right to interrupt. So let us just be polite and parliamentary about interruptions.
Thank you, Madam President, for the reminder. Madam President, I was saying, Madam President, there was no health insurance at a time when that VAT was introduced at a 15%. And now you have a government, my government, that is proposing that we look at a holistic plan for this country. We are looking at all these structures that have fallen apart and that are falling apart, that went without maintenance for years, and we are putting things in place to maintain these structures. We are also putting things in place to introduce health insurance for the people of this country, Madam President. And this is where our hospitals, our healthcare institutions will come in, where people will see a better level of care, a better standard of care. This is what we are working on right now, Madam President, and every health institution is being paid attention to. I have to take this opportunity, if you will allow me, Madam President, to applaud the people and to commend the workers at the Ministry of Health, because I see the work that they do on a daily basis. And believe you me, Madam President, they are working hard. They are working assiduously as we speak to continue to open OKEU. They are working very, very hard as we speak to refurbish the majority wellness centers so that the people can get better care, Madam President. So while we are looking at Christmas, giving people relief at Christmas time with the barrels and everything else, we are looking at giving our suppliers concession for printing educational materials. This government continue, Madam President, to come here to this honorable house every time to give benefits, to get benefits for our people, to look at ways and means we can improve on their lives, on their daily lives, and to see how best we can assist them. Every time we come to this house, it is to assist our people to get a better life and a better standard of living, Madam President. Madam President, with that, I believe I have responded to most of the issues, the real issues raised here, and I wish to say thank you very much.
Senators, the question is that Parliament, by affirmative resolution, approves the draft value-added tax amendment of Schedules 1 and 3 order, which amends Schedules 1 and 3 of the Act. C, in the case of Schedule 1, 3, under Item 1, to include a definition for the words educational supplies. 4, under Item 2.2, to include the supply of printing educational supplies. My apologies, it's wrongly written. Senators, the question is that Parliament, by affirmative resolution, approves the draft value-added tax amendment Schedules 1 and 3 order, which amends Schedules 1 and 3 of the Act. A, in the case of Schedule 1, under Item 1, to include a definition of the words educational supplies. 2, under Item 2.2, to include the supply of printing of educational supplies as a zero-rated supply of service. B, in the case of Schedule 3, to exempt imports of personal items, food, clothing, toys, and other household commodities contained in barrels. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion, say aye. Aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I move that the Senate stand adjourned, signed and aye.
Senators, the question is that this House do stand adjourned, sine die. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion, say aye. Aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Sitting adjourned.
We have come to the end of our live broadcast of the sitting of the Senate. The Leader of Government Business has just indicated that the sitting will be adjourned, sine and die. And if I could just go over a few of the highlights of the sitting today. The President of the Senate paid tribute to Mother Marian Pinto, who passed away this month. We also mentioned Mr. Gaspar Schalmine, a former senator and former Minister for Education and Culture, who also passed away recently, was paid tribute to. We had the statements from various ministers and the congratulations from the Senate on the St. Lucian artiste who traveled to Taiwan to perform in celebration of Taiwan's 108th National Day, which exposed many of the Taiwanese populace to aspects of St. Lucian culture. Of course, we also had the motion, which was rigorously debated. And if I could just read out the motion that was just passed in the Senate. Be it resolved that Parliament by affirmative resolution, approves the draft value-added tax amendment of Schedules 1 and 3, order which amends Schedule 1 and 3 of the Act. In the case of Schedule 1 under Item 1 to include a definition for the words educational supplies, under Item 2 to include the supply of printing of educational supplies as a zero-rated supply of service. In the case of Schedule 3 to exempt imports of personal items, food, clothing, toys, and other household commodities contained in barrels. Now, it is something that I believe all St. Lucians look forward to, especially at this time of the year approaching the Christmas season. To get a recap of today's proceedings, you can check us out on our Facebook page, the Government of St. Lucia's Facebook page, as well as our YouTube channel. And also to recap today's proceedings, you can watch our rebroadcast later this evening on the National Television Network, as well as further recaps through our NTN nightly news program, which broadcasts on weeknights at 7 o'clock. I'd like to thank you again for staying tuned with us through our live broadcast of the sitting of the Senate. Please stay tuned to the National Television Network. I am your anchor for today, Jacques Kingston Compton.